So for everybody who is listening now, I'm talking to the therapist Vajralila about lifespan integration, which is a relatively new therapeutic approach to trauma. Is that right? It was invented around 2003. Have I got that right?
Yeah, around that time. Yeah.
And it's gaining a lot of traction at the moment, and I think it's especially popular in France.
It's very
Vad
big influence.
Yeah, as Vajralila is the main lifespan integration instructor for the UK, and has trained many psychologists and therapists in this approach from all sorts of therapeutic backgrounds. So, Vajralila, welcome.
Thank you.
And I wonder if you could just start off by explaining to me, in layman's terms, as far as possible, what lifespan integration actually is.
There's a question. Not always easy to explain, much easier to experience and understand from the inside out, but I'll do my best. Well, let's say how it came about. So Peggy Pace years ago was working with fragmented clients, complex trauma clients, and was getting limited success. And then she had someone that was quite dissociative, and she just intuitively started to say, do you remember this? And then do you remember this? And she kind of went through a bunch of this client's memories. And she saw the next session, the client came back in quite a different state. And so she started to think about this whole memory thing. And over time and over practice, she realized that repeating the repetitions of somebody's timeline back to them in one session can literally rewire the neural pathways in the brain. So over the years, this has developed, and now there's a lot of different ways of working with different kinds of trauma. But the way I see it at the moment, I have different metaphors that work at different times, but the metaphor that I'm working with at the moment is it's like this is the core self. This is the neural networks of an integrated self. And when trauma happens or negative experiences, these neural networks kind of go offline of the wholeness of self and kind of create their own little neural network somewhere else. And I think, oh, that's probably what we call parts in other therapeutic models. And what LI does is it kind of knows there has to be a strong enough sense of self to be able to integrate some of the complexities of trauma. So it has to work out, well, what can this system cope with being integrated first? So we wouldn't be able to go straight into a pre-10 trauma without working with building up a sense of self first. And the way we would do that would be largely by doing baselines, which is just reading the client's timeline, one memory cue per year, over and over again, maybe 15 times in one session, quite fast. There's quite a skill in knowing how fast to go, what tone of voice to use, how many cues to jump, because it might be too much to tolerate at first. So we're kind of helping the client tolerate their life narrative. And as they learn to do that more and more, we can literally identify places, parts, if you like, or traumas, and just hook them from the edge and then bring them back via the memory cues into the wholeness of self.
Okay, so I wonder if we could sort of see how that might work on a kind of in a practical way. Is there some way you might be able to walk me through what happens in a typical session?
It wouldn't be a typical session. A typical beginning well, maybe we'll start at the other end. Somebody that's not had too much trauma in their life, has had a good upbringing. Their first 3 years particularly were solid and good. You would probably find those kind of clients come into therapy wanting to deal with either a one-off trauma within the last 5 years or a relationship that's had problems. That's the sort of things. So that would be a fairly simple piece of work. And we have a protocol called relationship protocol. So if somebody came to me and said, 4 years ago, I split up with somebody and it's causing me difficulties now, something like that. I would gather the cues from before they met, just before they met that person, and then some of the cues throughout that relationship, and
Acute
then
memories.
memory cues, yeah, and then just a few cues 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, present, and just by repeating those cues back over and over again, it kind of gives the body mind system permission to get a new perspective on that relationship. So I've done it myself, for example, on a friendship, and received it. And what happened for me was I was just very aware of what was mine in that relationship breakdown. So it sort of cleared something for me. It made something clearer in a new perspective. So that would be a simple piece of work to
And
start.
gathering the cues, do we mean literally writing down the memories on a
Literally,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, literally writing them down. So there would be, so if it was a normal timeline, it would involve first memory might be I don't know, first day at school, learning to ride a bike, things like that. And there'd be one memory per year of that person's life, maybe more memories.
Mm-hmm. So is the idea behind it is that it allows us to kind of take a wide angle view of our lives and to see each the isolated incidents of trauma as part of a context, so that we don't focus in on it to the same degree.
Well, if you think about trauma and problems in general, really, the reason they're still activating is because they haven't got flagged as over in the body mind system. So there's a few things that might help. One is literally just going through the timeline helps the body mind system flag, it's over, that was bad, but now it's over, so I don't need to be reacting to anything that reminds me of that now as though it was still now. So that's one reason it works, because it literally proves to the body mind system that it's over.
Like a story, like a narrative.
It's more than a narrative. I think it's literally rewiring neural networks. It's literally changing. I don't know if you know about systems theory. Um, it's a system, when it has we're a system, each human being's a system. When a new piece of information comes into the system, like it's over, the whole system has to reorganize at a higher level. So it's different. The sense of self will be different than it was before. If it's too triggering, then that information won't get assimilated and it will just shrink back to what it was before. That's what trauma is. It never manages to evolve at a higher level. So we're helping give the information and then helping it integrate in a way that it can manage without overwhelming the system.
I see. And do we know
Yeah.
actually what's happening on a neurological level when people undergo this therapy? Have there been, say, brain scans of people who have gone through this, or
It would be great when that happens, but it's more of a working hypothesis, I think, now. I mean, there's been lots of stuff around neuroplasticity and, there's lots of evidence around that kind of thing. But it would be nice to, it'd be lovely to get somebody undergoing lifespan integration sessions and literally be able to see what's going on in the body-mind system. I think that's true of a lot of therapies. It's, we talk as though they're facts, and then, a few years down the track, it's like, oh, it wasn't quite like that. It was like this. So who knows what we'll find. There's been some studies in Sweden, some research studies and some experiential studies that have been helpful. But no, it hasn't been proved scientifically.
improved? And the studies that took place in Sweden, are they kind of randomized controlled trial type studies?
That's right. Yeah, you can find them on the website. I think they were largely with addicts, people with addictions. showing over a series of time the progress and the changes that they made. So, but
I
yes, it'd be nice to see more of that, I must say.
It would be. I mean, I wonder
Mm.
uh what clients come back and say about it, what kind of testimonials they make.
Yeah. Well, largely that they can, a few things, I think. One is that people can be more compassionate to their self and their own suffering. Another is that they no longer identify with their suffering. They can see it from more of a distance rather than being, part of it still. And largely knowing it's over. Bad things happen to me, but they're now in the past, and I have different conditions as an adult, and I don't need to live the way I used to do. I used to have to do to survive.
Because I guess there's something about writing the story of your life which allows you to get some sort of distance from it, almost
Mm,
like it happened to somebody else to some degree.
yes, I guess writing can do that, can't it?
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's more than just writing, but I get your point. There's a different perspective, isn't there, when things are written down. But the way we work is to help a client get into the right brain, into the more creative brain, so the thinking isn't going on. So sometimes we read a bit too fast, for example, for the client to keep up with in a left brain kind of way.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And it can be a bit frustrating. It's like, I can't keep up. And yet the body mind system has caught up and changes happen.
I see. And I've
Mhm.
heard that you can actually go back to sort of pre-birth times and use
Yeah,
that in your integration. Is that
yeah,
true?
absolutely. Yeah, we can take the timeline right back, pre-birth, because the body mind system remembers, not in a hippocampus kind of brain kind of way, but it's all there, isn't it? So
Do we remember? I mean, back to,
mm.
anything that happened before the age of 2, do you get clients actually remembering those experiences?
I've met people. I just did a training at the weekend, and somebody said they could remember a 2-year-old memory. So I think it's rare, but yeah, it certainly happens.
Okay.
Usually it's more like 4 or 5, I think.
Okay. Okay. And I
Mm.
wonder, is there something about lifespan integration that makes it superior to some other therapies for trauma, or is it more that it works as an adjunct to, say, I don't know, EMDR?
Mm. I, th- I, well, I mean, I don't know about the word superior, but I think um, it's a gentle therapy. And so working with colleagues that work, for example, in psychiatric units with very complex clients, what they're telling me is that it's very gentle. It doesn't lead to dissociation in clients. And their experience, which I think is really interesting, is a lot of clients with complex trauma with things like EMDR and IFS can become more fragmented. Um, and I've been thinking about this. I think that's kind of interesting. And my mind's like wondering why that might be. And part work in general, I think if we imagine an integrated neural network system to be like this, and then there's all the parts that are kind of floating around in outer space that haven't yet got integrated, they could be called parts. And sometimes therapy is just about people end up talking about their parts as though they're other people, and they don't get integrated into the wholeness. They're just parts that stay floating around. They don't get weaved back in. And I think that's what is unique about LI, that it literally weaves them back into the wholeness of self.
It allows you to accept yourself as a person with all these different experiences, with all these different reactions uh, to various things that happen to you in life.
A bit like the Russian doll metaphor. It's kind of, we're all of that in a wholeness, rather than there's little dolls out there that we can relate to as different, because they're not different. They're all part of.
I'm imagining a room full of floating Russian Russian dolls. But yes, you do hear about, I mean, I guess what I have gathered so far about sort of approaches to trauma is that you would generally start off by with stabilizing techniques to be able to kind of deal
Mm,
in the here and now with anything that happens to trigger your traumatic response.
mm,
So things like breathing, for example, and things, the staying in the present exercises and mindfulness. But of course, I guess there's a bit of a problem if the person you're working with isn't capable of regulating in that way. If they're so deeply traumatized, and
mm.
I then it leaves you wondering, what do you do in that situation? And I suppose something like lifespan integration addresses that problem because it does actually address the root of the problem.
Exactly, yes. And at first it would be so it stabilizes and processes all at the same time. It's like a bottom up and a top down all at the same time. So the speed of the reading of the cues, and someone very traumatized, kind of, you might do big leaps. It's a bit like a train journey. You just go really fast through all the train stations, and maybe just three of them, you'll kind of go, look, that happened, that happened, that happened, and now we're here. You'd make it safe, and then so that's how you'd stabilize the system.
Okay, so it's a kind of a mixture of approaches.
It does all those things in one foul swoop, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh. Okay, well, Vajralila,
Mm.
thank you. It's given me a lot to think about. Uh,
Mm.
is it a practice that's kind of really taking root in the UK at the moment?
It's slow, and it's interesting because Peggy discovered, I think it's interesting that she's a woman. And if we get a bit Jungian for a moment, the masculine and the feminine, I think the masculine energy is really good at kind of being out there and doing interviews and doing conferences, and and the feminine is a bit quieter and just does it from the background. So she just trusts that people will experience it and it will naturally grow. Peggy's always been, you don't need to push it. It will just grow organically by people
Trust the product.
experiencing it. Exactly. So I think that's what's happening. So yeah, watch this space in the UK.
Okay, I will do. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Vajralila, for your time, and I hope
yeah,
our paths will cross again in the
I
future.
hope so too. Thanks for inviting me. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.